This is the Heritage Walking Tour of Oliver. It is presented by the Oliver and District Heritage Society and the Oliver Tourism Association, with help from the ODHS Heritage Assistants Michaela and Abby. The Kettle Valley Railway was built in 1923 to facilitate the shipment of fruit from the South Okanagan. It extended from Hope to Rock Creek and near Penticton to Osoyoos. In 1931, it was leased to the Canadian Pacific Railway. This is a restored version of the building that originally sat further to the south on Station Street. The building has the traditional CPR aesthetic and shows the fine lines of the Prairie School of Architecture with its broad eaves, low roofline, and transom windows. Trains soon went out of fashion when it was discovered that automobiles and modern-day trucking were much more efficient. The last train went through Oliver in 1977. Today, the CPR station is home to the Oliver Visitor Center. We'll be going one block up Veterans Avenue to Main Street. Here we cross the street and head south. If you look to your left, you'll see the Oliver Movie Theater. This movie house was constructed in 1946 with a streamlined modern style during the golden age of cinema. The first movie ever played here was Great Expectations. When it first opened, tickets were 40 cents for adults and 15 cents for kids. The owner, Alex Goff, always had fun promotions: free passes for kids with the highest mark in their class and free passes on Mr. Goff's birthday. Alex Goff used his earnings from working at the Headley mine to build the theater. In 1964, it was sold to the Lesmeisters, who finally sold it to the current owners, the Ife family, in 2018. Be sure to take in a show, enjoy a real hot buttered popcorn, and appreciate the family feel of the theater. Continue walking south down Main Street and take in all of downtown Oliver. The downtown core was developed between the 1920s and the 1940s and reflects a variety of architectural styles that mesh together to create a unique feel. The buildings have false facades associated with boomtown architecture of the Old West with a twist. Although most boomtown buildings were constructed of wood, most in Oliver were done with cinder block construction. The cinder blocks were typically used to project success and sustainability for the business in town. The building facades have characteristics of arts and crafts, plainsmen, and streamlined modern movements. Onto these industrial, modernist, postmodernist, and mesa-style accents were added, creating a visual feast. Where Interior Savings is, there used to be a butcher shop, and the Fire Hall Bistro was the original 1922 volunteer fire hall. If you continue south on Main Street, you will eventually meet Fairview Road. There are a few points of interest here, but first, if you head left, we pass a statue built in June of 2020. Smoker Merchant created the Salmon Chief. The intricate statue is made of metal and represents the connection of the town of Oliver and the Osoyoos Indian Band. There is an informative placard accompanying the statue that will further explain the significance of the Salmon Chief in the Okanagan Valley. Further down that road, we turn and continue down McKinney Road before turning onto Sempukchin Boulevard. There you can find the Osoyoos Indian Band and the Sempukchin School. The office was built sometime in the 1970s and was later rebuilt in 2015 by Warner Construction out of Spokane, Washington. The building can now hold up to 200 people. The school, located behind the office, offers education to children from ages 5 to 12. Sempok Chin is built on the foundations of Indigenous knowledge, identity, and pride of the Okanagan people. On our way back to Main Street, you can see the South Okanagan General Hospital on your left. This is the hospital that replaced St. Martin's in the 1980s, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Back at the corner of Fairview and Main, you'll find your next spot. Originally, this Edwardian craftsman-style building was the South Okanagan Lands Project Office. It has always been recognized as a seat of authority for the community. The construction is interesting in that it is an authority building that looks like a home. This is because following World War I, symbols of government authority were shunned as part of the worldwide labor movement. Labor leaders held that government should be less prominent in people's lives. When the South Okanagan Lands Project was complete and local government took over, the building became Oliver Town Hall. Just in front of the building is the Oliver Cenotaph, built in 1948, in memory of the First and Second World War veterans. In 1995, a plaque was added to commemorate the Korean War veterans. Moving towards the intersection, you'll find the commemorative statue of John Oliver. This life-size bronze statue of honest John Oliver, who lived from 1856 to 1927, was made by local artist Letta Shores. It was erected in April of 2007. John Oliver was elected Premier of British Columbia from 1917 to 1927 and was the driving force behind the Ditch project. We'll talk about that more in a bit. The town was named after him because he created the Soldiers' Settlement Act, which gave returning soldiers from World War I parcels of lands to farm and help them become orchardists. This statue reminds passerbys where Oliver got its name. Behind the statue, you'll see a long red building facing Fairview Road. Originally housed the museum, the archives now reside in the former ambulance service building for the town of Oliver. It was opened in October of 1997. The archive houses the documentary history of the area. Researchers and visitors can learn more about the history of Oliver and its surrounding district, past residents, the natural history of the area, and more. The mural on the exterior of the building depicts some interesting facts about Oliver. It shows McIntyre Bluff, which is recently changed to its Okanagan language name of Nylington, and the irrigation system that waters all of Oliver and surrounding areas. This colorful mosaic on the side of the archives building was created in 2017 by dozens of community members who painted ceramic tiles for Canada's 150th birthday. The mosaic is one of 150 across Canada, with every piece making up a larger picture that honors Oliver's current status as Canada's wine capital. If you were to continue south on Main Street towards the outskirts of town, you'll find that Oliver is home to the beautiful Bhavsagar Sikh temple. It was originally built in 1998. At the time, it was just a small home, but has been expanded to the building we see today in 2003. The congregation is known for their generosity and hospitality to visitors. In front of the temple is a flagpole. It flies the Nishan Sahib. It is a holy flag that represents the values of the Sikh faith. In recent years, Oliver has been home to the Saki festivals and Kabaddi sports tournaments hosted by the Punjabi community, at which all are welcome. The wineries and orchard industries are greatly dependent on the Punjabi community here in Oliver, as they own about 70% of Oliver's orchards and vineyards. Oliver's population is about 5,000, and of that 5,000, around 1,000 are Indo-Canadians, many of whom are Sikh, originally from the state of Punjab, India. This home was built in 1925 by Carl Daniel Cullen after his marriage to his wife Beatrice as a place to watch their family grow. It was one of the first homes in Oliver and is seen as a local landmark. However, its distinctive turret wasn't added until the mid-1930s. Mr. Cullen was a prominent businessman in Oliver for over 80 years and ran the Cullen department store on Main Street, until it burned down in 1975. His wife, Mrs. Beatrice Cullen, was one of the first school teachers in Oliver starting in the mid-1920s. Continue up Fairview Road, just behind the Collins house. You'll see our next stop. This building was originally the Christ the King Catholic Church. Built in 1934, numerous additions were made over the years, including the current entrance in 1948. The battlements on each side of the front entrance are similar to the battlements on St. Edward's Anglican Church and the Oliver United Church. They represent the wartime history of Oliver and the special relationship it has with veterans. The congregation has moved to a new church located on Spartan Street. Now, the old building is home to Medici's Cafe and Gelateria. The cafe inside has kept features of the old church architecture and has the best gelato. Continue up Fairview Road, cross Nicholas Street, and then look left. You'll see the next church on our tour. This church has strong ties to Fairview, where an earlier version of the church, the Mission of St. Edward's the Confessor, opened in 1898 in the then booming mining town. Unfortunately, as the mining dried up, so did the church. The congregation moved into an old schoolhouse after World War I due to the influx of veterans and their families. It wasn't until 1950 that the building was constructed of pumice stone to emulate the construction of churches in Britain. The building stands in contrast to the old high school once located north across the street in the same spot as the current high school, making it surprising that they were designed by the same architect. Note the castle battlements of the bell tower. The bell itself weighs 700 pounds. The bell tower was originally located across the street to the west, but was moved as it was in the flight path of the airport. Today, the church still operates with regular service times. While you're here, let's talk about the ditch. There isn't much to look at anymore, but there's a lot of history. Gala Street represents the path of the west lateral branch of the South Okanagan Lands Project, also known as the Ditch. The Ditch was an initiative created by Premier John Oliver to provide immediate and long-term economic opportunities for soldiers returning from World War I. The BC legislature paid $350,000 for 22,000 acres of land in the Okanagan region from Nylington to the U.S. border. Premier Oliver saw agricultural potential in the region, but as the South Okanagan is Canada's only desert area, he believed it needed water to transform the land. Thus began the South Okanagan Lands Project. It all started with the building of a dam on the Okanagan River, which led to the project consisting of a 25-mile-long gravity-fed pipe and canal system constructed from cement, wooden siphons, and flumes. Construction began in 1918 and ran until 1925. Many side industries, including logging, sawmills, and engineering camps, popped up to support the project. The west lateral branch, represented by Gala Street, carried water from the main pipes to the homes and orchards north of Oliver by following the side of the valley. Should you choose to take a drive up Fairview Road, about 4 kilometers, you'll find a Fairview townsite marked by an information kiosk. Settlement started here based on the prospect of gold in the 1890s, but started to decline by 1910. At one time, Fairview was considered the largest urban area in the southern Okanagan. The site is now a preserve managed by the Oliver Soyuz branch of the Okanagan Historical Society. You will also find a walking trail along which you may see evidence of the former town. Enjoy your tour, but please do not go off the trail, dig on site, or remove any artifacts. Also, keep an eye out for cacti, black widow spiders, and rattlesnakes. It's safest if you stick to the path. From St. Edward's the Confessor Anglican Church, walk north and take a right on Gala Street and then look to your left. Southern Okanagan Secondary School. The original Southern Okanagan Secondary School was built in 1948. It was often referred to as the Taj Mahal by locals due to its impressive architecture. The school suffered a tragic fire in 2011, and the current school was opened in 2013. The reconstructed school resembles the old one, following a streamlined modern style of World War II. It mixes modern geometric features with the bas-relief discs in the auditorium. The new school is considered to be one of the most eco-friendly in BC. It boasts a geothermal heating and cooling system, a wind turbine, and solar panels. When the original high school was built, emergency tunnels and emergency shelters were built underground in case of the wartime threats during World War II and the Cold War. These tunnels led to St. Martin's Hospital across the street. However, the tunnels have since been removed. The new school is home to the beautiful Frank Venables Theatre. If you look to your right, across Gallows Street, you'll see a walking path and some houses. This is where St. Martin's Hospital once stood. Built in 1942 by the Sisters of St. Anne, St. Martin's Hospital was the first medical facility in the Oliver area. The Sisters were a congregation of determined women with a mission to provide education and healthcare. They funded the initial building cost of $130,000 and operated it for more than 30 years at their own expense. Over the years, the hospital treated many patients with tuberculosis and polio, delivered many babies, and provided excellent medical care. They continued to own and operate the hospital until 1973, when it was officially closed because it couldn't keep up with advancing technologies and the growing population of Oliver. St. Martin's was replaced in 1973 by the South Okanagan General Hospital and was ultimately demolished in 1981 despite rescue efforts by the residents of Oliver. Two of the statues that stood in St. Martin's are now held in the current Catholic Church. Continue down Gallows Street until you reach School Avenue and look left. Here you'll find the Oliver Elementary School. The name is misleading as it refers not to one building, but to three over an 85-year period. The first was built in 1929. It had 4 classrooms and a 5-acre playground. Unfortunately, it was demolished in 1990. The second was built in 1941, right beside the first. It was originally called Junior Senior High School. It had 8 classrooms, an auditorium with a stage, and a library. In 1949, when the high school was completed, this building became Oliver Elementary School, but was torn down in 1986. Another school was built beside the 1929 and 1941 school buildings in 1964. It also had 8 rooms. With some modifications, it is the Oliver Elementary School that stands today. Turn left onto School Avenue and walk towards Main Street. Look to your right when we get back to Kootenai Street. This building housed the office of Dr. Norbert Ball from 1933 to 1971. Dr. Ball was born on July 25, 1904 in Vernon, BC. He graduated from the University of Toronto in 1929, making him the youngest doctor in Canada at that time. He also served during World War II on the front line in Europe. His service was so distinguished that he was offered the position of Chief Medical Officer for the Canadian Army. However, Dr. Ball declined this offer and returned here to advance the health and wellness in Oliver, including assisting at St. Martin's Hospital. The apartments above the office were used by doctors working on call at the hospital. The construction was done in a streamlined modern style. The glass blocks, broad false pillars, and mantel around the door are all typical of this form of architecture. The building is now the current home of Oliver Boys and Girls Club. Cross the street and get to our final destination. The museum building was originally built in 1924 as a combination home and detachment office for the British Columbia Provincial Police, until it was disbanded in 1951. This is the best preserved BCPP Rural Detachment Office in the province. While still in use, the wives of the constables were expected to cook, clean, and look after the prisoners, the constables, and their families, with the latter living on the top floor. Starting in 1951, it housed a local RCMP detachment until 1966, when the new RCMP building was built where it sits today. After serving as a police station, the building became affordable rental housing and then a family home. In May 1981, the building was donated to the Oliver Heritage Society as part of the town's 60th anniversary so that it may become the community museum. In the same year, the Fairview Jail, one of the few remaining buildings from the old Fairview townsite, was relocated to the museum property for safekeeping. Today, the Oliver and District Museum is surrounded by a heritage garden that is filled with plants native to the Oliver area, as well as educational signage. Thank you for partaking in our virtual tour. We hope you enjoyed yourself. Be sure to visit the museum for more information about the history of Oliver and its surrounding area.